I'm Eric Collier, and this is my Lesson 5 assignment. The agenda for this assignment is as follows. I will go through the basic introduction, touch on the issue of long sentencing and drug offenders, and then discuss the current push for amending criminal penalties. Discuss cost per inmate, the demand for reducing population in prisons, the public opinion in legalizing marijuana, interest group, political views, political gridlock, current disposition in Colorado, proposal to address the issue, explanation of why to legalize marijuana, and then a conclusion. My name is Eric Collier. I am completing Lesson Plan 5 assignment titled Drug Control Policy for CJ 6100 Law and Public Policy. It is still a federal crime to possess, distribute, and sell controlled substances or drugs such as marijuana, heroin, cocaine, and unprescribed prescription drugs. On the topic of marijuana, however, there has been a slight shift in the public opinion in a few states on just how dangerous it is and the acceptable, if any, punishment that should be imposed on those that possess it. Some state legislators are rethinking the procedures of punishing drug offenders and just simply sending them to prison. The hope of many state legislators is that minor drug offenses can be reduced to community-focused supervision with optimal treatment options. In such states as Alaska, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and Washington, D.C., there have already been the legalization of small amount of marijuana to be used for recreational purposes. Additionally, there has been a movement at the federal level to reduce the length of sentencing for nonviolent drug trafficking and even reassess those that were sentenced in years past under bad laws. Meanwhile, heroin, opiates, and synthetic drugs are still very dangerous and are still illegal in all 50 states. There is a real opportunity to reduce the costs across the entire criminal justice system and potentially make it illegal or less burdensome to possess and use marijuana in a recreational setting. There will still need to be laws against having large amounts with the intent to distribute, especially when it comes to crossing state lines where citizens believe it should be illegal, and it has to remain that way until legislation is passed stating otherwise. The cost associated with confining drug offenders is costly and is limited. The current push is for amending criminal penalties and then pushing the responsibility for rehabilitation down to the local communities for supervision and treatment options. Secondary, there is research available that presents to notion that longer prison terms don't necessarily mean crime is being reduced, and over the last 5 years, more than 33% of the states have changed their mandatory sentencing on nonviolent drug offenders. This is also important at the federal level, where in 2015, the U.S. Department of Justice provided data on about 95,000 sentenced drug offenders, of whom 99% were drug traffickers or found to be possessing drugs. The cost per inmate at the state level is about $31,000, with the highest state being New York at $60,000. At the federal level, the cost on average is $32,000 per inmate. These are costs that could be dramatically reduced if there is focused rehabilitation at the local level. Such actions could be taken to put drug addicts in supervised treatment facilities. This would allow many the opportunity at future employment instead of having a felony on their record and almost never being able to get or hold a decent job. In 2013, 3 federal judges ordered California to reduce its prisons population from 135% to around 100% of its capacity. Legalizing small amounts of marijuana and releasing inmates that were previously convicted of petty crimes such as drug possession will go a long way in drastically reducing the current population and be a key element in keeping those numbers low. Conditional release in the criminal and civil court system has always been an option for lawmakers for those with mental illness and sex offenders, and should be used in this instance to reduce and help improve life for those that should remain in prison. This improvement will come because the budget will be allowed to be distributed to more and to provide more services, treatment, rehabilitation, which will lower recidivism and even be more humane. There certainly has been varying public opinion when it comes to the topic of legalizing marijuana, even in small amounts. The number one reason to legalize marijuana is to boost revenues for states that approve of it. Next would be the value time given back to law enforcement, courts, and correction facilities that would otherwise have to spend more time working on petty cases. Lastly, would be more of a comprehensive use for medical treatment for those that are deemed medically required. Those that oppose the legalization of it look at the perception shift and simply aren't ready to be tolerant yet, and the amplified possibility of younger Americans being addicted to marijuana at an earlier age. The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws is a special interest group who has a mission to move public opinion sufficiently to achieve the repeal of marijuana prohibition so that the responsible use of cannabis by adults is no longer subject to penalty. Very quickly, looking at political views, Democrats support the legalization of marijuana and Republicans are against it, but things are starting to shift, as the president will mention later. Political gridlock. Opposition? What opposition? There hasn't been a lot of opposition to the legalization of marijuana across the states where it is still illegal. It simply boils down to voters. Most states have now had a referendum or an actual bill voted on, and some have passed and some have not. It was very interesting to find out that out of Colorado, which is where marijuana was first legalized, only 13% of Colorado residents actually smoke marijuana, yet the entire state gets to benefit from the revenue from taxes. The rational goal is a part of the Feely model. The Feely model of rational goal would be best applied here as it would provide perspective on how the whole country should address or view the legalization of marijuana from an incentive-based view as opposed to a derogatory view that is based on misinformation and biases. The Feely model will enable lawmakers and voters to look at the legalization of marijuana from a functional aspect as opposed to a propaganda on television. The legalization of marijuana has happened in a few states without any oversight or appeal from the federal government. Even now, a Republican sitting president, Donald Trump, is leaning towards the legalization of marijuana, and most of his followers are okay with it. President Trump recently stated that he would look at the issue and possibly support it. A new bipartisan bill, what would return decision-making on marijuana laws to individual states. This is a huge step forward in the possible passing of a federal bill that would legalize marijuana and ultimately reduce even the federal prisons. In conclusion, I would start a small group that would attract similar ideological groups in hopes of forming a special interest group that could eventually lobby for federal government to legalize recreational marijuana at the federal level. The main focus would be on generating revenue through taxes and then reducing prison populations immediately and keeping prison populations lower in the future. These are all benefits of legalizing marijuana. The money saved could be rationed out but allowed to be used for rehabilitation purposes for those who choose to quit marijuana altogether. Next, I would ensure that we could lobby to Missouri state officials at the Capitol in Jefferson City, as well as the state senators and congressmen. These would be immediate impact touch points, as it would set the stage for a proposal to be made to Congress, voted on, and then potentially signed into law by the president. Thank you and have a great day.